Hey, what's up guys? Max here with the last video update. Today we're gonna take a look about the process of rehousing your Iscorama. If you take a look at what's at the table, this is basically everything that you will need in order to swap housings. It's the Isco lens itself, a little screwdriver supplied, then the two pieces of housing also supplied, a lens wrench also supplied. Then the things that are not supplied is lighter fluid and the lubricant in case if you decide to re-lube the lens, though it's not mandatory. Also some electric tape, again it's not supplied as well, and some Q-tips. So let's get right to it. So there are basically two steps of how you swap the housings. Step one is you remove the old housing. Step two is you install the new housing. There's an optional step in between which would be re-lubing. A lot of people who purchased the Proxiscope were actually asking, how do I re-lube the Iscorama? So we're gonna have a separate video about how to do that. But let's start with taking the old housing off. So basically you just take your Iscorama and take a lens wrench, which is in a box, and it has this one thicker rubber side which you are supposed to place face down, so it goes inside the Iscorama housing, and you make sure that it goes in well, and you start spinning it counterclockwise to unscrew the nameplate. So that's the first step, getting rid of the nameplate. And you just need to give it a little spin, and if you feel that it starts moving, you can actually continue unscrewing with your hands, like so, and the nameplate is out. I'm gonna place it aside here. After you remove the nameplate, you're gonna reveal 4 tiny screws that are holding the front housing in place. Before you do anything to the screws, you must set the focus to infinity. And that's crucial, so you have to set the infinity mark to be precisely focused. Then get a screwdriver and start unscrewing those little screws. So you're working very close to the glass here, so take your time, because if you damage it, it's your fault and you ruined a perfectly good glass. So don't rush, take your time, unscrew all 4 of them, and if you have little drops of glue on those screws, you gotta take a lighter fluid and dip a little bit of lighter fluid on a Q-tip to dissolve that glue. After you've done that, you can unscrew all 4 of these little screws. So I'm almost done with the last one here. I don't want to cut this video so you can actually see how long it takes to swap housings, so I don't want to like do a time lapse or something. Now I'm getting all these 4 screws out. I'm gonna place them inside the nameplate so I don't lose them. They're super tiny and it's a little tricky. Unfortunately, this little screwdriver is not magnetic, but it's still not that hard to do it. If you take your time, again, there's no need to rush. After all 4 screws are out, you can simply take the front piece off like so. It slides off very, very easily, and that's it. That's your old housing. So now step 2 would be assembling the lens back, but a little step in between these two would be actually re-lubing the helicoil if it's stiff. So in order to do this, you can click on a link in a description of this video, and that will take you to a separate little video showing you how to do that. If you're not planning to re-loop the Iscorama, you can just keep watching. Alright, so now it's time to put new housing on. New housing consists of two parts. There's this bigger ring which has gears, it's the outer shells, gears and focus marks. And there's a smaller ring which is a little collar that goes on the Iscorama body itself. So we start with the small one, and this small ring has a little indentation inside, and this is where your old stopper is supposed to go. So you locate this little indentation and you locate your old plastic stopper. It's this little black tab here on the old plastic body, and you just match them, and this new housing is just supposed to go on very, very easily. It's supposed to sit there more or less free. It's not supposed to be super tight, and the reason for that is that there are a lot of different plastic bodies out there, and some of them are slightly bigger, some of them are slightly smaller, and I have to account for all of them and basically make one ring that fits them all. But we'll have to secure this ring to the plastic body very, very tightly, because if we don't do that, there's a high risk of front element unscrewing while you are gonna use the lens. So obviously we don't want we don't want that to happen. So we'll have to tighten up this little ring very, very nicely. So in order to do that, you can use the electric tape. You have to apply it to this little tiny plastic stepping right here on the body. This is where it's supposed to go. Get some scissors and cut a stripe of the electric tape that will be just as high. It's 7 millimeters high, and it will go on the plastic body. So you can do that. My tolerance here is actually not enough to fit electric tape inside. If I put a little bit of the electric tape on the plastic body, I can't put this ring on because it becomes too fat, though the thickness of this is like 1/10 of a millimeter or something like that. So the tolerance here is fine in my case. It might be a little different in yours. So just, try it on and see if there's enough space for you to fit one layer of electric tape. Okay, after you've done that, you should secure it with these 3 little screws that are in the metal body itself. So again, you should use a little screwdriver in order to do that, and you shouldn't tighten them one by one. You should instead tighten one just a little bit and then go to the other one and tighten that one just a little bit more, and then go to the third one, tighten that one a little bit. This will ensure that the new piece of housing is aligned to the center of the lens, to the central axis of the lens. And that's important because if it skews one of the ways, this new bigger housing that is supposed to rotate around it will not rotate freely. It will, it won't have enough space if you misalign the smaller ring around the plastic body. So yeah, just again, don't rush, take your time, tighten all these screws one by one, little by little. So these screws, they have pretty sharp ends, and I didn't want to file them out because these sharp pointy ends, they actually provide a very, very secure grip. And that secure grip is essential for this ring to sit on the plastic body, but it will leave tiny, tiny marks on the plastic body itself. So if you don't want that to happen, you should definitely use electric tape under this smaller ring. in order to secure the plastic and make sure that these little screws leave no marks. Or you can decide to file these screws just a little bit in order to give them a little rounder edge, so they will not bite into the plastic that much and they will not leave any marks. So I have tightened all my screws, and a good way to check if you've done it properly is to take this new ring and pick the Iscorama up, holding it just by this new piece of metal. And mine sits very, very tightly. I actually can just try to rip it off and nothing will happen. It's a very, very secure fit, and that's what you want. If you pick yours up, and obviously you don't have to pick it too high, just check if it's tight there. If you pick yours up and it wobbles or it falls out of this ring, you didn't do a job good enough to secure it in place. And again, you are risking basically with your lens, because if this ring is not tight, the front ring can unscrew the helicoil and your front element will just pop up, fall out, fall on the ground, shatter into pieces, and again you will ruin a perfectly good glass. So make sure that this ring is super fit. After you've done that, after you made sure that it's very fit, take your bigger ring, match it up with the infinity mark, with the infinity mark, like so, and try twisting the bigger ring around the smaller ring. You're supposed to turn it in order to make sure that there is no scratching sound, that everything is turning smoothly, it doesn't stop randomly at some random focus mark. Basically you have to make sure that this bigger ring turns smoothly around a smaller ring, and you just basically place it on the lens and just turn it without turning the helicoid inside. So mine is turning very smoothly. Then you're supposed to turn the ring all the way clockwise to match your infinity mark of the body with the infinity mark of the lens. And after you have done that, you're supposed to screw those 4 little screws back in. So I'm gonna do that right now. Again, you're working super close to the front element, to the glass itself. You don't want to damage it with the screwdriver, so you should take your time, do it one by one until 4 of them are in place. You don't want to over tighten these screws because they're fairly old, and I was actually trying to over tighten them just to make sure that my grip is secure, and one of their heads fell off because it wasn't it was an old screw and I applied too much force to it, so I had to replace it, and finding such a small screw was not that easy. But you also can't leave them too loose here, because if you do, you have the same risk of unscrewing the front element while using this. Because if your screws, these little screws, aren't holding the front element in place, what can happen is that you'll turn the lens one way and it will basically turn the helicoid, but then you can turn it another way and the helicoid will stay in place while the body will turn. And then if you again turn it the first way, there can be an issue of stoppers not working, because the body will be misaligned with the helicoid, and you'll be able to again unscrew the front element completely and it will fall off. So after you've placed all these 4 screws in, make sure that all of them are tight. Again, don't over tighten, but make sure that just with the proper amount of force, you can make sure that they go to the very end of the threads. After that is done, don't rush to put it on your camera. Just over the table, try turning it to make sure that you have installed it right. Now you're turning the front, and the helicoil with the glass inside is turning as well. And you should turn it and match it up with the 1.1 mark, the infinity setting on the old body and the 1.1 meter mark on the new body. So do that and make sure that you cannot detach the front element from the body itself. This helicoil has a very limited length of threads, and we're taking it very close to its limit. It's still not that close, but it still has like 15 to 20 degrees of turn to actually unscrew completely. But I want to make sure that you didn't do any mistake during this installment process. So for your own safety, for the safety of your own glass, don't rush to the camera. Try turning it a couple of times over the table. Make sure that these stoppers rotate without any noise whatsoever, because they shouldn't be touching, the metal parts of the body shouldn't be touching, and they should turn very, very smoothly, especially if you re-lubed your Iscorama. So after you've done that a couple of times, rotated it back and forth, and after ensuring that everything is nice and smooth, you can actually throw it on your taking lens and start shooting. But there's one other step left, which is the nameplate. Now this part is a little fun, and I'll give you a little background about what's going on here. So when we actually made a prototype of this new housing, I was trying to screw the nameplate back into the metal body, and it didn't go in at all. So I thought that there was some error during manufacturing and the threads of the new body is too small, but it turned out that they're not. We measured them, and they turned out to be exactly 72 millimeters wide in the deepest parts of the threads. So what's the issue then? So these threads are actually made by a machine, and it has a very fine tolerance, and it cannot make these threads too big or too little. But the plastic front ring, or the plastic nameplate, is actually a plastic mold, a plastic cast, and the tolerances on this one are very messed up. So we measured this one with a digital caliper, and it turned out that in one part it was 73 millimeters wide, and in the other part it was 72.4 millimeters wide. So not just was it too big, but it was also elliptical in shape, because probably it got a little deformed over time or something like that happened. So in order to account for that, we made threads on this production run slightly bigger, 72.4 millimeters wide, which still might not let all of you who purchased this rehousing screw in the nameplate easily, because still your nameplate, like mine was, might be just too big. So in order to do that, I'm supplying you with 2 sheets of sandpaper, and you can take it to the threads of the plastic nameplate just a tiny little bit to get rid of that additional 0.4 millimeter or so. You don't have to apply force at all. Be very gentle, take a little bit off, try screwing it in, take a little bit off, try screwing it in, and be prepared that this step can take you a lot of time. It certainly took me a lot of time, but as you can see, my ring, after just a little bit of sanding, is turning, just screwing in very, very smoothly and easily. I can actually do it with my fingers fairly easily, and when I get to the very end of the threads, I'll again use a lens wrench to make sure that my ring sits very tightly inside. And that's basically it. You have assembled it. Congratulations. And if you have any questions down the road or something is not going right, don't hesitate to contact me right on with any questions. So I hope everything is clear, and good luck